Welcome to the channel for the first time viewers. Welcome back from my existing subscribers. This video is going to be more so for some of my buddies that are looking into getting into PC gaming and don't know much about it so far. So if you're happen to be one of those people that are just swinging through YouTube trying to learn a little bit about PC gaming, this video is going to be for you. So I want to focus on four things because right now the PC market is really broken, right? So I want to focus on four things that you should be looking at. Not going to take a long time to explain them in this video, so I'm just going to get straight to the point. All right, your CPU is the computer chip that powers everything, right? So when you're running a game, think of console. So if you're coming from console, they have the advantage of having something called APU. So everything is all together, right? So the part that runs the game also produces what you see on the actual monitor or TV. In the computer world, you have a computer chip and then you have a graphics card. So your CPU, do some research on it. i7, Ryzen 7, remember those. i9, Ryzen 9, those are going to be where you want to lean more towards. i5 is okay, Ryzen 5 is okay, but they have more cores and more threads on the Ryzen 7s and the i7s of the world, right? So think of trying to bring in your groceries. You got two hands to carry in your groceries versus having one hand, and that's going to be your i3s and your Ryzen 3s. They're great for starter PCs. So as you look through these websites, if you see something with a Ryzen 3, I would try to stay away from it. Or if you see something with an i3, try to stay away from it. i5 is okay. That's like middle of the road. But really, if you want to stretch your legs into this PC, then i7, Ryzen 7, and try to get 10th generation when it comes to Intel. So Intel is usually who is named, who's branded i7s. So try to get 10th generation and above. Or if you're looking at Ryzen, then Ryzen 3000, so 3700X, 3800X, 5800X. Those are the ranges that you should look in. So 3000 and 5000 series. Reason being, there's been a lot of improvements as far as gaming and productivity goes. When you're looking at the two different companies, if you're looking more for, I want to be able to stream, i9, Ryzen 9 is where you really want to go. Typically, the pre-built I've seen have been around 2100 to 2500 with mid-level graphics cards. That's the next subject I want to talk to you about. The GPU, or graphics card, is what processes all of the work that the computer chip that we just discussed hands over to it. It's important because the faster your graphics card, A, the more it costs, but B, the better your gaming experience is. It turns out what is FPS. So if you're used to playing Siege on console, 360 or not 360, but Xbox One, PS4, you'll see in the top left corner that 59 or 60 FPS. Those consoles could technically do a little bit more in some cases, but that's your frames per second. How many pictures are being processed by that GPU? Now, the better your GPU, like I said, the faster it is, the better your gaming experience, which is why you see things like, 144 hertz monitors that can process 144 pictures every second it refreshes, and sometimes why somebody may see you before you see them, that type of situation. So that's when your graphics card comes into play, right? I would say anything fair in a pre-built, because I'm strictly talking pre-builts. I don't foresee this market changing for a while, so this video is going to become out of date. I would say 3060, 3070, 3080 if you want to be a content creator. NVIDIA is the company you want to look more towards. If you're looking for raw performance, you just maybe want to record offline a little bit, you don't care about streaming, then you can look more towards the AMD. You're getting better frames per second in most cases with the AMD cards. They have the 6700 XT, the 6800, the 6800 XT, and the 6900 XT. So those are the models really that you should be looking into. Like I said, they offer better performance than the NVIDIA cards in most cases. When it comes to, I want more performance, you're probably not the type of person that's going to be turning on ray tracing. But back to NVIDIA, I want to tell you some advantages of getting an NVIDIA card. You're going to have something called DLSS, and on console, you might have heard channels like Digital Foundry talk about super sampling. It's something like that, but on PC. So the lower your resolution, the faster your graphics card can put out the frames we talked about earlier. What that means is the technology DLSS, it's creating the frames at a lower resolution. So your graphics card is working faster, having better performance, and it's upscaling it, which means putting it out at a higher resolution for your monitor to see and for you to see. So in turn, you get better performance at less of a cost, right? So it's kind of tricky. I have a couple of videos about it. You definitely want to do some research on DLSS. But if you're a content creator, regardless of DLSS, you should be looking to NVIDIA. For streaming, it looks more clear. I've streamed on both. I definitely will prefer the NVIDIA cards when it comes to streaming. For recording, either one will do the job. And for gaming performance, then definitely want to look at AMD. To me, it's just, you get more value if you're not turning on all those features, those bells, those whistles, like ray tracing. They just run games better when it comes to not having those extra features. Next, I want to talk about your RAM, right? So when you look at a pre-built, you may see that most of them run with either 3000 megahertz RAM or they run with 3200 megahertz RAM. The sweet spot for Ryzen is a lower latency kit, which is what they call kind of packages of RAM. Lower latency kit, so something around CL15 if you start to research it, but 3600 megahertz and up, right? So that's the sweet spot, if you could find that. For Intel, it's a little bit different. Really, you can get whatever RAM kit you're looking for if you have a higher end Intel. So if you have a i9 or let's say an 11700K, the memory controllers on that, without getting too technical, can handle faster RAM. AMD, you can get faster RAM, but if you don't want to have any issues, you just want plug and play, look at kits that are 3600 megahertz. 16 gigs is the minimum I would recommend. 32 gigs is to me the sweet spot, and 64 gigs is if you're feeling ambitious. But that is where you should look for RAM speeds to get the most performance. Ryzen, it matters a little bit less than it did a few years ago, but if you go with a Ryzen 3000 build, you definitely want to make sure you get really fast RAM, because your performance can be impacted by getting slower RAM, right? So when you see a pre-built and it has, a Ryzen 7 3700X and it only has, 2933 megahertz RAM or 3000 megahertz RAM, you may want to still pick up that PC because they're hard to come by, but look into buying a new kit of RAM at 3200 megahertz or 3600 megahertz. I personally have Corsair. There's going to be some links in the description for the RAM I have myself. I have 3200 megahertz RAM. It's decent timings, but I definitely have room to improve my RAM speeds, and that will impact my performance in games like Warzone a little bit. So in some games, it's actually significant. So if you can get the right sticks of RAM, but as a beginner, that's where I would kind of start. And the last thing I want to talk about is your power supply. So when you buy a pre-built, they may not give you the best power supply, but you definitely want clean energy running through your system. The power supply connects everything. And I know this is something that, as somebody that's buying a pre-built, it may not make a lot of sense for you to go out and buy a better PSU. But take a look if you can, open it up and see if you can see what brand it is and research the brand. Try to stick with the bigger brands like the EVGAs, the Corsairs, I'll write a couple different other brands on there. But if you've never heard of the brand in your life, just research it to see if it's a good brand, because there's a ton of them, but some of them are really, really, they have shaky reputations. I would say Corsair, to me, is my favorite. That's the one I recommend to all my friends. So the links to both of my Corsair power supplies are in the description. I also had an EVGA 450 watt when my PC was super budget and I didn't have anything that needed a lot of power. Speaking of power, the higher your power supply rating, so let's say the wattage is, let's say it's 850 watt versus 1000 watt, right? It's a percentage scale of the fan. Once you get over 60%, your fan gets a little bit louder. So if you have a system that is, let's say, a 3080 and a i9 or an i7, and you try to overclock it, or you start throwing some extra things in there, and you only have a 750 watt power supply, it's good enough. It's going to run well, and that's more than you need. But the more you add to it, you know, what could potentially happen is it may be a little bit louder as you increase the load that it needs. So let's say you get to 60%, 70%. Well, now the fans on the power supply are going to kick on, making for overall louder experience. And like I said, this is just supposed to be just super basic for y'all. I only wanted to talk about 4 pieces, but we'll recap. The CPU is the brain. It literally takes care of everything. Make sure you get a good one. Research. That's your best friend. The GPU processes what the brain gives it. So as the computer chip can handle, the frame sends it to the GPU. It'll process it and give you an image, right? So that's where you get your FPS from. The RAM is just as important as some of the other pieces, but is less talked about. So just make sure you get a decent rated kit. So lower latency and the higher speed. But if you have Ryzen, 3600 megahertz is the sweet spot. And then your power supply. That's going to be the energy. Pretty much think of it as the blood pumping through your system. You want to make sure it's clean and more than you need, just so that you never have to push it. Think of a car. I think that's the best analogy I could give you right now for those of you that made it this far. Thanks for sticking with me through some of the rambling. Think of a car. The better oil you put in it, the better parts you use, the longer it'll get you. So the same thing with this power supply. The higher the rating, the better the quality, which is when you see the different standards like gold, silver, bronze. Better the rating, you know, the less you push it on top of all that, the longer it will last you. So if you drive a car at 100 miles per hour everywhere you go, it's going to break down faster than if you were to drive it 30, 40 miles everywhere you went. That's why you see some of these old people with, you know, 20, 30-year-old cars that run perfectly fine until they give it to their niece or their grandkids. Balls to the wall, car starts breaking down. All right, that's all I got for this video. You all be easy. I will catch you in the next one. For those of you that are a little bit more advanced, I try to keep it simple, but go ahead and we can have a conversation if you have any questions in the comment section. All right, that's it. He's knocked. They're both knocked. They're both knocked. Yeah, let's go. The other teammate, I don't know if he's still down.
Kobe.
No, he didn't make it.
Kobe.
Yeah. One's dead. The other one, he got up. Musty. Gotta be. Dead.
Nope.